General Thex Moran stood on the command deck of the Valdoran flagship Star Shield Star. His forearms gripped the metal railing as he watched another one of his orbital defense platforms explode in the darkness of space. The bright flash lasted only seconds, but he knew that hundreds of his soldiers had just died. For 8 long months, the crystalline swarm had been moving through the Outer Rim territories like a plague. They were not like other enemies the galaxy had faced before. These creatures looked like giant insects made of living crystal. Their ships were sharp and angular, cutting through space with deadly purpose. The swarm was methodical in everything they did. They would arrive at a star system, study the defenses for exactly 72 hours, then attack with perfect precision. They never made mistakes. They never showed mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. "Sir," Commander Velthari said, her voice shaking with exhaustion. She had not slept properly in weeks. None of them had. "The Galactic Defense Pact has finally responded to our reinforcement request. The Zentorian battle fleet is being prepared. The Harmony Coalition is mobilizing their orbital defense grids. The aquatic worlds are sending their deep space cruisers." Thex Moran turned to look at his aide. Velthari was young for a Valdoran, barely past her first century of life. Her blue skin had turned pale from stress, and her usually bright eyes were dim with fatigue. "How long?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. 6 weeks minimum, sir. The bureaucratic approval process requires approval from all member worlds. Then they need to coordinate fleet movements, establish supply lines, create unified command structures. Her voice trailed off as another explosion bloomed in the distance. This time it was one of their supply ships, carrying food and medical supplies to the outer defense stations. 6 weeks, Thex Moran repeated quietly. He looked at the tactical display showing the crystalline swarm's advance. Based on their current speed and attack patterns, his analysts estimated they had maybe 6 days before the swarm reached Valdoran Prime, his people's homeworld. 6 days to hold off an enemy that had already destroyed 17 civilized worlds. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of computers and the distant sound of repair crews working on battle damage. Every officer on the bridge knew the mathematics. 6 days against 6 weeks meant defeat. It meant the end of the Valdoran civilization. That was when the impossible happened. The main entrance to the bridge opened with a soft hiss. Everyone turned to look, expecting to see another messenger bringing more bad news. Instead, a figure in a strange uniform walked in without being announced or invited. The being was clearly from one of the newer species, bipedal, with pale skin and dark hair. He was shorter than most Valdorans and carried himself with an unusual confidence that seemed out of place given the desperate situation. Lieutenant Colonel Jinwoo Kim looked around the bridge with curious eyes, taking in the alien technology and the stressed faces of the Valdoran crew. He had learned basic Valdoran during the 3-day journey to reach their position, though his pronunciation was still rough. "General," Kim said in his broken Valdoran, the words coming out slowly as he tried to get them right. "Heard you needed help. My fleet's 3 hours out." The entire bridge crew stared at him in confusion. General Thex Moran blinked his large eyes several times, trying to process what he had just heard. "I'm sorry," Thex Moran said carefully, "but who are you? How did you get onto my ship?" "Jinwoo Kim, Lieutenant Colonel, Terran Expeditionary Force," the human replied with a small bow that seemed to be some kind of greeting gesture from his species. "Your security let me through when I said I was here to help." Thex Moran looked at his security chief, who simply shrugged. In the chaos of the ongoing battle, no one had thought to question a lone figure who claimed to be there to assist them. "But, how did you even know about our situation?" Thex Moran asked. "Humans are not part of the Galactic Defense Pact. Your species was only discovered 50 years ago. You barely have interstellar travel." Kim's face broke into a wide grin that showed his white teeth. It was an expression that Valdorans found strange but somehow reassuring. "We monitor all distress calls," he said simply. "All of them. When someone, somewhere in the galaxy, calls for help, we listen. And when people need help." He paused, searching for the right words in Valdoran. "We don't wait for paperwork." Commander Velthari stepped forward. "With respect, human, we are facing an enemy that has destroyed 17 worlds. What could your small, new civilization possibly do that the combined might of the Galactic Defense Pact cannot?" Kim's grin grew even wider. "You're about to find out. My people have a saying, we might not be the biggest, or the strongest, or the smartest. But when our neighbors are in trouble, we show up. And when humans show up to help." He looked out at the stars where the crystalline swarm was approaching. We show up like a storm. 3 hours later, the space around Valdoran Prime lit up with dozens of hyperspace exits. General Thex Moran watched his sensors carefully, expecting to see the clean, organized formations of a proper military fleet. What emerged from hyperspace made him question whether his sensors were working correctly. Admiral Hyjin Park's fleet looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The ships were all different sizes, shapes, and colors. Some were clearly old cargo haulers with weapon systems welded onto their hulls. Others appeared to be passenger ships with missile pods attached to their sides. A few looked like they had once been mining vessels, now bristling with improvised armor plating. The strangest part was not their mismatched appearance, but the decorations. Every single ship was covered in colorful markings, symbols, and what appeared to be personal messages painted directly onto their hulls. Some had pictures of flowers. Others had fierce animals or geometric patterns. One ship had what looked like a recipe for soup written in bright yellow letters along its entire side. General Thex Moran, came a clear female voice over the communications channel. This is Admiral Hyjin Park commanding the Terran Relief Force. We received your message and came as quickly as we could. Thex Moran stared at the display showing the approaching human vessels. Admiral Park, thank you for responding. However, I believe there may be some confusion. We sent a request for military reinforcements to deal with a major threat. No confusion, General. We are your military reinforcements. But, these appear to be civilian ships. There was a pause, and Thex Moran could hear laughter in the background of the transmission. Another voice came through, this one belonging to Captain Sung-Ho Lee, whose converted cargo hauler was clearly visible on the main screen. General, Lee said with obvious amusement, in human space, the difference between civilian and military is mostly paperwork. You need help, we brought help. That's all that matters. Thex Moran looked at Commander Velthari, who was studying the human ships with fascination and concern. Sir, she whispered, their largest vessel appears to be a modified freight hauler. Their weapon systems look like they were installed in someone's garage. We can hear you, came another voice from the human fleet. This belonged to Dr. So-Young Choi, who was aboard a ship that looked like it had once been designed for scientific research. And you're right about the garage part. My cousin Minitsu installed my plasma cannons in his repair shop on Mars. Despite their desperate situation, Thex Moran found himself almost smiling. These humans were certainly different from any military force he had encountered. They seemed to treat their desperate battle against the crystalline swarm as if it were some kind of interesting problem to solve rather than a fight for survival. Dr. Choi's voice came through again, now more serious. Admiral Park, I've been analyzing the crystalline swarm's attack patterns from the data the Valdorans provided. I think I understand why they've been so successful. Go ahead, Doctor, Admiral Park replied. The swarm follows perfect mathematical attack patterns. Every move they make is calculated for maximum efficiency. They analyze their enemy's defenses, find the optimal solution, and execute it flawlessly. They are predictable because they are optimal. General Thex Moran interrupted. Dr. Choi, with respect, that is exactly why they are so dangerous. Their optimal strategies have defeated every force sent against them. That's true, General. But there's a problem with optimal strategies. Which is? Dr. Choi paused for a moment, and Thex Moran could hear her typing on some kind of computer. Optimal tactics assume that your enemy will also act optimally. They assume rational decision-making, logical resource allocation, and predictable responses to threats. Admiral Park's voice carried a note of understanding. And that helps us how, Doctor? Because, Admiral, humans don't act optimally. We do stupid things that somehow work. The communications channel filled with laughter from multiple human ships. Marine Commander Woojin Nam's voice cut through the amusement. Nam said, his voice filled with good humor, stupid things that work aren't stupid. They're just unconventional. Thex Moran was beginning to understand what Lieutenant Colonel Kim had meant about humans showing up like a storm. These people did not think like any military force he knew. They seemed to approach warfare the same way they approached everything else, with creativity, improvisation, and a complete disregard for conventional wisdom. Dr. Choi, Thex Moran said carefully, are you suggesting that the way to defeat an enemy that uses perfect tactics is to use imperfect tactics? Exactly, General. The crystalline swarm has conquered 17 worlds because they could predict and counter every logical response. But they've never faced an enemy that makes decisions based on hunches, emotions, and what humans call gut feelings. Captain Lee's voice came through again. General, My ship used to haul frozen fish between Earth and the outer colonies. Now it's got enough firepower to level a small moon. The swarm's computers are going to have a very hard time figuring out how to fight a fish transport with delusions of grandeur. As Thex Moran watched the human fleet take positions around his own forces, he began to feel something he had not experienced in months. Hope. The first engagement began exactly as the crystalline swarm expected. Their massive dreadnought, a ship the size of a small city, emerged from behind a dead moon with mathematical precision. Its crystal hull reflected the light of distant stars, creating rainbow patterns across its surface. The ship moved in a perfect straight line toward the combined human and Valdoran fleet. General Thex Moran watched his tactical display as the swarm ship approached. All ships, assume defensive formation Alpha 7, he commanded. It was the standard response to a single large attacker: create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining safe distances between friendly vessels. The human ships, however, did not move into the expected formation. Captain Taehyun Oh's mining vessel Lucky Strike suddenly accelerated directly toward the enemy dreadnought. The ship moved in what could only be described as a drunken spiral, weaving left and right in patterns that made no sense to anyone watching. "Oh, what are you doing?" Admiral Park's voice crackled over the communication system, confusion clear in her tone. "Dodging." Oh replied cheerfully, his ship continuing its bizarre dance through space. "My navigation computer died about 3 years ago. Been flying by feel ever since. Works pretty good." The crystalline swarm's dreadnought began firing its primary weapons, beams of focused energy that could cut through the thickest armor. But every shot missed. The targeting computers, designed to calculate intercept courses based on logical flight patterns, could not predict where Oh's ship would be next. This was because Oh himself did not know where his ship would go next. He was flying entirely on instinct, turning when something felt right and accelerating when his gut told him to. It was the most random flight pattern anyone had ever seen in space combat. The swarm dreadnought fired again and again, each shot missing by meters. The ship's tactical systems began running rapid calculations, trying to find a pattern in Oh's movement. But there was no pattern to find. "Ha!" Oh laughed over the radio. "Can't hit what you can't predict." But Captain Oh was not just dodging. As his mining ship spiraled around the enemy vessel, he began deploying his cargo, industrial mining charges designed for breaking apart asteroids. Instead of using them as intended, he scattered them around the crystalline swarm ship like confetti at a celebration. The charges floated in space, each one armed with proximity sensors that would detonate when something came too close. They bobbed and drifted according to the complex gravitational forces between the ships, creating a field of randomly moving explosives. Engineer Jihai Seo, watching from her converted research vessel, suddenly understood what she was seeing. "Admiral Park," she called out excitedly. "Captain Oh isn't fighting them, he's mining around them." The crystalline swarm dreadnought found itself surrounded by dozens of floating bombs, each one following its own unpredictable path through space. The ship's perfect formation meant nothing when it could not move without risk of triggering an explosion. The swarm tried to shoot down the mining charges, but they were small, numerous, and moving randomly. For every charge they destroyed, Oh deployed 2 more. Soon the entire area around the enemy ship was filled with a deadly cloud of explosives. "Brilliant!" Admiral Park exclaimed. "All ships, adopt Oh doctrine. Stop trying to fight like a military force. Start working like what you actually are." What happened next would be remembered as the strangest battle in galactic history. Captain Sung-Ho Lee's converted cargo hauler began launching shipping containers filled with scrap metal at high speed. The containers burst open on impact, creating clouds of debris that interfered with the swarm's sensors. The passenger liner Gentle Breeze commanded by Captain Minute G. Kim, opened its airlocks and began deploying boarding parties, not in military assault shuttles, but in the ship's own emergency evacuation pods. The pods were too small and moved too erratically for the swarm's point defense systems to track effectively. Even Dr. So-Young Choi's medical ship joined the chaos. Instead of staying safely in the rear as medical vessels usually did, she began using the ship's surgical lasers as precision weapons. The lasers were designed for delicate operations, but they could cut through crystal hulls just as easily as they could cut through tissue. The maintenance ship Hard Worker started spraying industrial lubricants and cleaning chemicals into space, creating a slippery, corrosive cloud that made it difficult for swarm fighters to maneuver. A converted restaurant ship began launching its entire food supply. Frozen meals in metal containers became improvised projectiles that confused the enemy's targeting systems. General Thex Moran watched in amazement as the human fleet completely abandoned every principle of space warfare he had ever learned. They were not fighting as a coordinated military force. Instead, each ship was doing whatever its crew thought might work, using whatever tools and weapons they happened to have available. The result was complete chaos. The crystalline swarm's tactical computers, designed to analyze and counter logical military strategies, could not process what they were seeing. Every calculation they made was based on the assumption that their enemies would act rationally. But humans, as Dr. Choi had predicted, were not acting rationally at all. They were acting human. Captain Eun Ji-han had spent 20 years racing luxury yachts through asteroid fields for wealthy tourists who wanted excitement. Her ship, the Golden Wind Asterisk, was built for speed and style, not war. The elegant curves of its hull were designed to cut through space with grace, and its interior was filled with comfortable seats and expensive decorations. Now, as a crystalline swarm cruiser bore down on her position, Captain Han did exactly what she had always done. She treated it like a race. "Attention, ugly crystal ship," she transmitted cheerfully to the enemy vessel. "You are now entering the Han racing zone. Please keep your weapons fired to yourself while I show you some real flying." The swarm cruiser fired a barrage of energy beams, each one calculated to intercept the yacht's predicted flight path. But Captain Han was not flying a predicted path. She was flying like she was trying to win the Grand Prix of the Outer Rim. Her ship twisted and turned through space, using gravitational slingshots around debris and performing barrel rolls that would have made passengers sick if she'd had any. The yacht's engines, designed for high-speed racing, pushed the ship through maneuvers that no military vessel could match. "This isn't warfare," she transmitted to the rest of the human fleet, laughter clear in her voice. "This is advanced recreational flying with explosives." The Golden Wind Asterisk was not equipped with military weapons, but it did have racing flares, bright pyrotechnic devices used to mark racing courses. Captain Han began launching these at the swarm cruiser, not to cause damage, but to confuse its sensors with brilliant flashes of light. Meanwhile, Marine Commander Woo Jin Nam was preparing for the most unusual boarding operation in military history. His team was not made up of professional soldiers. They were construction workers, miners, and heavy equipment operators who had volunteered for the mission. "Listen up, everyone," Nam said to his team as they prepared to breach the hull of a damaged swarm ship. "We're not soldiers. We're contractors who happen to be armed. Look at that crystal hull and tell me what you see." "Looks like a construction job that needs some aggressive renovation," replied Foreman Park Dae-ho, hefting his plasma-cutting torch. "Exactly. Jisoo, you worked on underwater installations. That crystal looks like the mineral deposits we used to clear from intake pipes. How would you handle it?" Engineer Lee Jisoo examined the enemy hull through her helmet camera. "Same way we always did, Commander. Cut the support points first, then work our way in section by section." The boarding team approached the crystalline swarm vessel with the systematic efficiency of experienced construction workers. They did not use military breaching charges or assault tactics. Instead, they treated the enemy ship like a difficult renovation project. Park Dae-ho used his industrial cutting tools to slice through the crystal hull as if he were removing a damaged wall. Lee Jisoo identified the structural weak points and marked them with spray paint, just like she would mark pipes that needed replacement. The swarm defenders inside the ship had prepared for military assault tactics, coordinated attacks, suppressing fire, and tactical movements. They had no idea how to respond to humans who were essentially performing very aggressive construction work on their ship. "Coming through," called out heavy equipment operator Kim Tae-sung as he used a modified mining drill to create a new entrance. "Someone order a skylight." While the boarding teams worked, Dr. So-young Choi was making the most important discovery of the battle. From her science vessel, she had been analyzing the way crystalline swarm ships communicated with each other. "Admiral Park," she called excitedly over the communications channel, "I think I understand how the swarm coordinates their attacks so perfectly." "Go ahead, Doctor." "They share perfect information between all units in real time. Every ship knows exactly what every other ship is doing, thinking, and planning. It's like they have one giant brain controlling thousands of bodies." Admiral Park considered this information. "That explains their perfect coordination. But how does that help us? If we can introduce enough chaos into their communication network, their coordination will collapse. They'll start making random decisions because they won't be able to process conflicting information. How much chaos do we need to disrupt them?" Engineer Minute Ho Kang, who had been listening to the conversation while trying to repair his ship's damaged communications array, looked up from his work and grinned. He said, We're humans in space. We generate chaos just by existing. Give me 5 minutes and I can flood their network with more random information than their computers can handle. Kang began working on his communications equipment, but not in the way it was designed to be used. Instead of sending clean, organized signals, he began broadcasting everything at once: maintenance reports, personal messages, music from his collection, random thoughts, and even his shopping list from the last time he was on Earth. The effect on the crystalline swarm was immediate and devastating. Their perfect information network, designed to handle logical, organized data, began choking on the flood of random human information. Swarm ships started making erratic movements as their shared consciousness tried to process grocery lists alongside tactical data. Engineer Minute Ho Kang looked at his jury-rigged communications array and smiled. What he was about to do went against every rule of military communications he had ever learned. Instead of maintaining radio silence or sending coordinated tactical information, he was going to do something completely insane. "Admiral Park," he called out, "I'm ready to flood their network. But I need every ship in the fleet to help. What do you need us to do?" "Start talking. All of you. At the same time. About anything and everything." Within minutes, every human ship in the fleet began broadcasting simultaneously. But these were not military communications or battle reports. These were the random, chaotic thoughts and conversations of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Captain Taehyun Oh began transmitting his ship's maintenance logs from the past 3 years. Day 847, replaced the coffee maker again. Note to self, buy better coffee maker. Day 848, found out the toilet in section C makes weird noises. Probably should fix that. Dr. Soyoung Choi started broadcasting her personal grocery list. Need milk, bread, those little cookies Jin-ae likes, toothpaste, more coffee, definitely more coffee, and I should probably buy vegetables, but I'll probably just order takeout again. Engineer Kang shared his collection of terrible space jokes. Why don't aliens ever land at airports? Because then they'd be immigrants. What do you call a spaceship that drips? A crying saucer. Captain Eun Ji-han began describing her favorite racing memories. There was this one time on the Titan circuit where this guy tried to cut me off at the third turn, so I pulled a move my grandmother taught me, and let me tell you, Grandmother Hen did not raise any slow drivers. The communications channels filled with dozens of overlapping conversations. Marine Commander Nam was giving detailed instructions on how to make his mother's famous noodle soup. Captain Lee was complaining about his ex-girlfriend. Someone was singing an old Earth song badly. Another person was arguing with their ship's computer about the proper way to calculate fuel efficiency. The effect on the crystalline swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Their perfect information network, designed to handle clean, logical data from thousands of coordinated units, suddenly found itself trying to process grocery lists, maintenance complaints, bad jokes, cooking recipes, and personal relationship problems. Their computers are choking on our garbage data. Dr. Choi reported gleefully, watching her instruments as the swarm's communication network overloaded. Their processing systems can't handle random human thoughts mixed in with tactical information. On the tactical display, the results were visible immediately. The crystalline swarm fleet, which had moved with perfect coordination just minutes before, began making erratic decisions. Ships fired their weapons at empty space, as if attacking invisible enemies. Others began turning in slow circles, as if their navigation systems had become confused. Some swarm vessels stopped moving entirely, hanging motionless in space like confused animals. Others accelerated randomly in different directions, colliding with their own allies. All ships, Admiral Park announced, barely able to contain her laughter. Final phase. Stop trying to be professional. Be yourselves. Be human. What followed was the most unprofessional, chaotic, and effective military action in galactic history. Human ship crews began ignoring orders and following their own instincts. Captain O decided his mining ship would work better as a ramming vessel and began chasing swarm fighters like he was playing a children's game. Captain Han turned her yacht into an impromptu command center, giving racing commentary on the battle as if it were a sporting event. The maintenance crews started arguing with their officers about the best way to fight space battles, leading to heated discussions that were broadcast across all frequencies. That's not how you angle the shields. I've been fixing ships for 20 years, I think I know. Well, I've been shooting things for 10 years. Dr. Choi began conducting scientific experiments in the middle of the battle, taking measurements and notes on swarm technology while dodging enemy fire. Fascinating. Their crystal structure changes color when exposed to plasma. I wonder what happens if I try different frequencies. Engineers improvised new weapons from spare parts and personal belongings. Someone had turned a food processor into a projectile launcher. Another crew was using their ship's garbage disposal system to create debris clouds. The beautiful, coordinated, logical crystalline swarm found itself facing an enemy that operated on pure chaos, creativity, and stubborn human determination. Their tactical computers, designed to fight rational opponents, simply could not process what they were experiencing. After 2 hours of complete confusion, the swarm fleet began retreating. Their ships moved away from the human forces in disorganized groups, their perfect formations broken forever. As the enemy disappeared into hyperspace, General Thex Moran approached Admiral Park's ship. "Admiral Park," he said, his voice full of wonder and gratitude, "how do we thank you? How do we repay this debt?" Admiral Park's voice came back calm and warm. "No debt, General. You needed help, we helped. That's what neighbors do. But how do we contact you if we need assistance again?" Captain O's cheerful voice cut into the conversation. "You don't contact us, General. We'll know when you need help, and we'll show up. That's what humans do, we arrive like a storm when people need us most."